back to Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And this week's guest, we have the triple threat, Ami Kassar. He's the CEO of Multifunding, the host of Ami Insights or Ami Insights podcast, and the author of the book, The Growth Dilemma, Determining Your Entrepreneurial Type to Fund Your Financing Comfort Zone. That was an abysmal introduction. Ami, can you do a better job for me?
Jerry, thanks so much. My mission in life is to help entrepreneurs succeed and grow their business. My passion is helping entrepreneurs. I have a personal bias for staying in control of my company. And if I'm going to do all this hard work, wanting to stay my own boss. So that's my bias. It's not for everyone and not for every company, but my choice would always be to keep control. And that means if you need a financial instrument to help you scale, you consider debt before you jump right into the equity bandwagon.
Well, I love that. I've got to say, so you and I have a lot in common. I'm the founder of a company, I'm the author of the book, and quite obviously the host of a podcast. Our passion is identical in that I'm all about entrepreneurship. I've spent the last dozen years in that space. But where we differ is this. I focus on the people side of the business, and I view finance as sorcery. I'm 100% certain that folks in finance wear pointy hats, have a magical wand or staff, and I understand little about it. But one of the things you just said that I love is keeping control. I know for certain I don't spend 80 hours a week building a business to give it to somebody else. So could you expand on that a little bit more?
So look, we all face choices, and it's not that there's a right answer or a wrong answer, right? Some people love the idea of building multiple businesses in their lifetimes, flipping, selling multiple businesses, and selling pieces of business, having investors, having other people to answer to, having capital stacks, having boards of directors, and all that stuff. God bless them, right? Other people like to they want to control their business and control their destiny. And it's not that investors are wrong, let me get you wrong, but what I always say is if you take on an investor, whether you like it or not, you get married or you get married again. Because There's now someone else at the table who has an opinion, rightfully an opinion, about the future of the company. And you have to respect that. You took their money and you sold them a piece of the company.
I think that's
an investor.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry. I was just agree with you. I think that's an important thing that folks often overlook. An investor in many ways is another way to say partner. And I think that people don't make that connection when they take that check.
100%. I got the money. I'm great. Okay. But now that investor is entitled to an opinion about the future of the company, if you're going to sell the company, where the company is going to go, how it's going to grow. That opinion, depending how the deal is structured, might actually have a say in that matter or the ultimate decision in that matter. So if you're going to take on investors, slow down, take a breath, and make sure that you and they are really aligned in purpose, in mission, and in outlook for the company. Do they want to grow at a slow and steady pace? Do they want to grow like 100 miles a minute? How involved do they want to be? How are they going to respond in crisis? If the company needs debt in the future, will they be willing to personally guarantee debt if that's what it needs? There are a whole lot of things like most people wouldn't get married after a first date. Okay. Right. Don't take on an investor after a first date just as much as you're courting them. They also should be courting you.
So much like marriage, an investor shouldn't be a tequila shot decision.
Nor should debt.
Correct.
Right.
Now, and I want to talk about that in a minute, but you said a lot there I'd really like to spend a minute to unpack. again, it's important to note neither Ami or I are saying venture capital is bad or bringing on investors is a bad thing, but there are many paths to the top of the mountain. And in those paths, what's best for one person is not necessarily the same path as what's best for another. If you're building the type of company that number one, a VC would be interested in, meaning it has an exit in 5 to 10 years, there's a strong probability, assuming success, that it can be purchased, acquired by another company or go public. Number two, you're not there to build a long-term company. You're building a company to flip. Then yeah, VC might be your road. It could conceivably be it. But I've spent the majority of my career on the technology services side, whether it's, technology consulting companies like Kassar with the MuleSoft consulting company, or prominent custom software development house, or Influence Understood, the management consulting company. And frankly, investors typically aren't that interested in those types of companies. Their companies made really more for the long haul. And I think other options like debt are very powerful. I think, and please correct me on this, I'm sure, Avi, but I think when most founders think debt, they think of day 1 to day 20 with their credit cards. So I'm assuming
you have to, like, one of the things I really just don't like about the show Shark Tank, okay, although every once in a while they get cute on there and they create some kind of quasi-debt instrument that's super expensive, is that Shark Tank perpetuates the myth that a great investor is the best way to build a company. Okay. And first of all, 99% of entrepreneurs don't have access to investors in the first place. Okay. Yes. And when you do, Mr. Wonderful, who will probably never speak to you again after he invests in your company, is probably not the best investor for you. So I would love to see Shark Tank where there was, let's say, I'm making it up, or one of them offered an entrepreneur $600,000 for 30% of the company. And then a lender was on there and said, you know what? I'll give you a loan for that $600,000 with an SBA loan, but I'm going to put a lien on your house and you have to pay it back. Okay. Then all of a sudden, that entrepreneur is faced with a real choice, and not an easy choice. Okay. And those kind of choices would be really, I think, valuable. Now, let's be clear. Sometimes companies come on the show that aren't going to get an SBA loan. They're not eligible for it. Not everyone's going to get an SBA loan. Sometimes there are other more expensive financing mechanisms like purchase order financing or other instruments that could help that entrepreneur, or accounts receivable financing, that if things work out will still be much cheaper than giving away equity in the long run. So, but we should dispel the myth, and Shark Tank helps perpetuate it, that equity is the only way to go in growing a business. It's not.
Wait, are you trying to tell me that a television program where all the hosts are investors would perpetuate a myth that investing is superior? Say that's not what you're saying. Certainly, Hollywood wouldn't lead us astray in that way.
No, they never would. No self-interest involved.
So talk to me then, if you would, about what debt instruments are available. You just mentioned a couple. Purchase order financing, which, if I understand you correctly, is what I grew up called factoring.
A little different, but it's okay.
Okay, SBA loans. Could you share a little bit more about what debt vehicles are available and kind of when they make sense?
Let's start with the SBA, which is the best kept secret in government. Okay, and SBA is so everyone understands. SBA does not lend money, but they provide guarantees to some banks, mostly banks and some non-bank lenders, to make riskier loans than they otherwise would. So it's the government's way of spawning innovation and trying to let businesses push through.
I worked with
And
the SBA once, not for a loan, but they're now responsible for vetting companies who are going to get certification. So, for example, my company, Redbeard Solutions, is a disabled veteran-owned service business, or small business rather. So we had to go through the SBA to get that certification.
correct. That's not an area I'm personally involved in, but that would be a case. Absolutely. Okay. And so the any one individual is eligible for up to $5 million of SBA guaranteed money per industry. Okay. And you can use the money to start a company, start a franchise, equipment, buy a company, buy out a partner, growth capital, working capital. And so there's a tremendous amount of potential. The program also gets confusing. There are a lot of rules, and there are a lot of different doors that you can go into the program through. Depending, everyone, sometimes people go to their bank. SBA's got a major branding problem. So people go to their bank and say their bank tells them they're not eligible for an SBA loan. So then they just assume they're out. But sometimes, just like investors, you got to kiss a bunch of frogs before you find your prince. And sometimes the bank, you just got to keep going, right? If 10 banks tell you you're out, you're probably out. Okay. But if 1, 2, or 3 banks tell you you're out, that's not necessarily the case at all.
So I would
And
imagine there's a fair amount of nuance, Ami, but can you give some general guidelines for folks? Would that be appropriate in this context?
sure. So first of all, is that, and this is real estate involved, SBA loans or a line of credit, but for core term debt, which is used for helping business growth, those SBA loans are 10-year amortizations. Okay. And the SBA loans are going to be a hell of a lot easier if you're cash flowing and making money. Okay. If you're not, you can get it for a startup, but it's a lot harder. There are projection-based SBA loans. But what's important to know is that as you present, and this is what we do at our company, not just for startups or all kinds of stages of companies, when you present your story to the lender, you got to know how to put the lipstick on the pig. It's a very different language when you're talking to an investor or you're talking to a lender. Investors buy dreams. Investors want to see that, great, I'm going to be this $100 million company in 5 years or 10 years and blah, 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 blah. That's what investors buy into. Lenders manage risk. Lenders want to know that you can pay them back. And they're not going to really lend you money unless they're comfortable that you can pay them back. So you have to be much more disciplined and present a plan that the money is either going to help you stay cash flow positive or get you cash flow positive pretty quickly. And so you kind of have to make a decision about how you want to grow your company. If you envision building a company where you know you're going to need to lose money for many years, well, that's your plan, which is not my speed, but that's okay. Then you probably need some investors. But if you plan to build a company based on a more solid and stable foundation, more like the tortoise versus the hare, then you can do it with debt. But if you do it with debt, make sure you're being thoughtful about what debt instruments you choose, that you're confident in your ability to pay it back, and you're setting yourself up, structuring your debt in a way for the maximum amount of flexibility.
So as far as debt instruments go, kind of circling back, so one of them would be the SBA loan, which, if I understood you correctly, is a fixed loan for an amortized, you said 10 years is a pretty standard amount of time.
Correct.
So I'm assuming there's a steady payment along that line.
Correct. 10 years of even monthly payments.
Okay. And are there any restrictions for the company and how they utilize that money?
they're not going to just, I mean, they might write you a blank check for up to $500,000, but more than that, they're going to want to have a very clear use of proceeds.
Okay.
So a lot of it really depends upon what company you're building. Now, there are also SBA loans. I've seen them as small as $1,000 and up to $5 million. And actually, if it's an owner-occupied real estate project, which means you run your business out of 51% of the real estate, and the project is only real estate and equipment, you can get up to $12.8 million. And if you slap a solar panel on that sucker and call it green, you can go to 25.6. Okay. So, but you're not, oh, great. If someone says, I got this great startup idea, I'm going to go get my SBA loan for $5 million, you're not going to get it. You kind of have to make a choice about it. It's sort of like the tortoise or the hare analogy. And how do you want to build your business? Do you envision, are you trying to do a sprint? Or do you envision, it's not a marathon, it's more like a triathlon, okay? Because a couple times along the journey, you're going to change scenery and change climates, and you're going to stop and you're going to vomit and you're going to think you're going to die, and then you'll continue and all that. But if you're running the triathlon, you got to think about your capital needs in tranches. Like, what do you need to get there now? I'll never forget early on in my business, which is almost 15 years old now, Jerry, which is, wow. I have a hard time believing. I met a woman, someone was referred to me, who, of all things, had invented the world's greatest horse shampoo. Okay. And some jerk off had taken the only $40,000 she had to her name to help her prepare a business plan that, if I printed it, probably would go up to my waist. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
And she wanted to use the money. She needed $5 million to buy her building and her equipment and hire a management team, and she wanted to borrow the money. And I said to her, have you sold any of this stuff yet? And she's like, no, I can't sell any of it until I have my factory. And I said, sorry, I hate to tell you this, but you probably need to throw your business plan in the garbage. And you need to go find a co-packing facility. And you need to go start knocking on doors and trying to sell your horse shampoo. The factory's not coming yet. You got to get some sales and traction. And so when you think debt, you got to think in stages. Okay. And that's okay. During the pandemic, I was one night helping to mentor a emerging entrepreneur, female entrepreneur group in an African-American church in the community. And there was a woman there who had been trying for 2 years to raise $30,000 so she could build a little kitchen. And her business model was she wanted to make desserts for restaurants that didn't have desserts to sell. Okay. And no one had ever suggested to her that instead of waiting to build that kitchen and trying to spend all that money and put her neck out for that $30,000, she should find a kitchen and go and rent it for an hour or two a day and go bake there. Okay. So you have to think, there are different ways to think through what you want to accomplish, and you have to decide whatever's the best for you.
I'd like to pause there for a minute. This is a little bit of a tangent, but a related one. So one of the topics we talk about often here on the show and in our LinkedIn work is that 93% of startups fail. And there's lots of reasons given. But I will die on the hill that says the majority of those are related to the founder not having basic business fundamentals understanding and not having done enough research to understand their options. And I feel like both examples you just gave fall under that heading. The folks just, they don't know enough about business to make the decisions that will lead them to success.
Yeah, I just got off a phone with somebody here a little while ago this morning who's been building a pretty cool company for 15 years. And it's sort of a SaaS model, but he hasn't taken on investors yet. And his bank's breathing down his neck and doesn't want to give him. He's just kind of hanging in there. He's not making money. He's not really losing money, but he's treading water a little bit. And he's working with one of the top 20 biggest banks in the country who's telling him that it's time for him to go raise equity. And he needs $10 or $15 million to scale his company. And he needs to go for investors for it. And my answer to him was, well, you have to decide what's right for you, but not so fast. Like, I can go get you probably $1 million of debt tomorrow. Clear out that useless big bank, and most of the time the big banks suck. And we could have a smaller bank to work with. And you could keep going, but you have to decide for yourself. You want to, and there's not a right answer or wrong answer. You probably have an interesting enough model that you could go raise a $10 or $15 million, but you're about to give up control of your baby that you've built for the last decade or so. And maybe it'll work out great, or maybe it won't. But if you want to stay in control, there's another option for you. If you choose to stay in control, I can help you get the $1 million, but I don't have one. You have to really dig deep into kind of your soul and decide which of those scenarios is better for you.
I love that. It's interesting. My favorite business book, in my opinion, the best business book ever written, and one that I gift to every child in my life when they graduate from high school, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. Now, admittedly, not an exciting read. He's very dry, but an important read. And one of the tenets he lives by, one of those seven habits, is beginning with the end in mind. And I think you just really hit that on the head with your statement, Ami. It's not that there's right or wrong, answers to these questions or views. It's that, does what you're doing support where you're planning on going? If my plan is to sell in 10 years, my decision will probably be different than if my plan is to build a legacy business I can hand down to my children.
And you have to think about all this stuff. And before you take on an investor, you also have to be clear about that, because your intentions better be aligned with their intentions, or you're going to have a problem.
Exactly. You're going to have static, and to that same end, I've got a good friend that runs a small niche executive search firm. He's a solopreneur. It's just him. He does about $300,000-$400,000 a year in revenue. And he knows that the business he built is unsellable, that when the time comes for him to be finished, he's just going to shut it down. But he's okay with that because it empowers him to live the life that he wants to. And he makes more than enough money to ensure that when he does decide to close the doors, he won't be wanting for money then. So again, I think it's just a matter of knowing what you want to build, knowing where you want to take it, and choosing the right path based on that data.
Yeah, and these are personal choices, right?
Yeah.
That everyone has to make for themselves, and that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make, right? And there's not a right answer, and some of it has to do with also risk tolerance. Okay. For some people, the thought of taking on debt or putting up your house just makes them vomit. And they would just rather work with other people's money and deal with all that stuff. And that's okay. I really think that perhaps the most important measurement of success of all is a good night's sleep. Okay. And, what's going to make you sleep better at night?
100%. It's interesting. When I started my very first business, I would wake up anxious at night, convinced I had no money, I wasn't making enough money. I never would. And I have to remind myself that, I have this many contracts generating this much revenue per month and have this much in the bank. I got to the point that I was doing it so often in the beginning that I could run the list in my head in about 30 seconds. It became almost an exercise I had to do to go to bed. So I think finding your tolerance is a very important mental health step.
Right. I think that I joke about it, but I'm not really joking. I think that there should be instead of the Inc. 5000, we should maybe have the Sleep 5000. Okay. And what I mean by that is that we should have something that says that if you have a certain minimum revenue threshold, whatever we decided, $2 million, you agree to put on a sleep monitor for the year. And whatever entrepreneur manages to keep their company at $2 million or more, and whoever sleeps the most during the year, that's who we should celebrate.
Yes, they win. That's awesome. So we
not
talked
this
about
top line growth. Like, what are we celebrating? Like that could be the road to death.
Gosh, I think I shared that I've worked almost exclusively in technology services. In my first 7 years, my company was focused on sales training, recruiter training, and management training in that space. And it was crazy. Nearly every company, regardless whether they were a staffing firm, a software development house, some type of a technology consulting company, they almost always had the same vanity metric. Our revenue is X. And I was like, I could care less what your revenue is. What's your gross profit? How much of that are you keeping? Right. Staffing especially, that's a vanity metric, because if you're working in the contracting space, 75% of that revenue is immediate leaving with the people that you have out working. So we came up with the little slogan that revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity.
That's right. Yeah, many of us in the community celebrate the Inc. 5000. I see people posting about it. And I know what's going on in their lives. And they're like, oh my God, I made number 287. And everyone's giving them high five and celebrating. I'm like, you're not careful, you're going to have a heart attack.
I was just going to say, number 287, 3 divorces, 1 minor heart attack, and I'm in the hospital.
It's not worth it.
100%. So we talked about SBA loans. Are there any other debt vehicles that you would recommend that make sense for the startup or smaller business?
There are also debt instruments I'd recommend you stay the hell away from.
Okay? Probably as valuable.
Okay. So debt instruments that they're going to put the money in your account in 24 hours to 48 hours are almost always going to cause you more short-term gain for a lot of long-term pain, and are going to put you on a treadmill that's going to be really hard to get off of. So just don't do it. Okay. Like, we all hit emotional points in our journeys when we're feeling like we don't know how something's going to work in 48 hours. And if you go online, there are hundreds of people who'd love to solve that problem for you. Okay. And get you the money real quick. But usually the APR is exorbitantly high and the payback is really fast. And you're going to have to add one and add another one and add another one. And before not, you're working for those companies and instead of for yourself. Manage your expenses and cut expenses before you jump on that debt treadmill. There are facilities against asset-based lines, against certain against accounts receivable or inventory if you have it. We're super excited. We're soon going to be launching. I'll be able to share more of it soon. A partnership with the bank in 11 states where we'll be offering lines of credit and full checking accounts and all that, which will be really neat. So just remember, and sometimes we were talking about earlier before about purchase order financing. So if you have big orders that you don't know how to finance, there are instruments like purchase order financing. And my team will always talk anybody through the different instruments that might be available to them and the pros and cons. And our whole thing is we're just going to give you straight up, honest feedback and advice to treat entrepreneurs like you'd want to be treated. So there are instruments. Debt markets are fairly rational. You kind of fit in a box, but there's usually more than one way to skin a cat. So I joke about it, but it's true. If you go to McDonald's for lunch because you're in a hurry, you could have indigestion for a few hours, but then you'll get over it. Okay. And if you if you get financing in a hurry, you could have indigestion for a few years or ruin your business. So take a deep breath and take the time and figure out really what's best for you.
So I feel like what you just said was we should get McDonald's.
We should what?
Get McDonald's. That's what I feel like you just said.
No.
So if you could give a small business person deciding between the equity path and the debt path any piece of advice, it sounds to me like what you're saying is think it through and think of your outcome. Is that accurate?
Think it through, think of your outcome and get some different opinions around you and try to find some mentors who've done it different ways, and don't jump into bed. And if you are going to jump into bed with an equity investor, make really sure that your values and your vision and kind of the outcomes that you both want for the company are aligned. Or if you're going to jump into bed with debt, make sure you really understand the terms of what you're signing yourself up for, because you're going to have to pay it back, and figure that out also.
Yeah, I love that last piece of advice, because I think that's an area in debt specifically, but in contracts in general, where small business people maybe don't have the experience to realize that the details in that contract can be the difference of whether this is life-changing in a good way or life-changing in a very bad way.
100%. So.
Awesome. Well, Ami, I really thank you for sharing your insights as it relates to, debt instruments and the differences between debt and equity with us on the show. If folks want to learn more about you and your company, first, could you tell us a little bit more about your company in specific, and also where they can reach out to you and find you?
Sure. Our company's called multifunding.com, and our whole mission is to help entrepreneurs think through these choices. We do not help people get equity, but if you choose to use our help and it makes sense, we can help you with debt, and we'll heavily lean on the SBA for most of that work, not exclusively, but mostly. I also have a daily blog called AmiSights, AMISIGHTS.com, which a lot of people enjoy and is a lot of fun. And you can find me, Ami Kassar, on LinkedIn, and happy to help anyone that needs it. So.
That sounds awesome. For anyone new to the show, those 3 locations will be in the show notes. So if you're listening to us as you're driving down the road, please don't crash your car trying to write them down. When you get where you're going, they'll be there waiting for you. And for those of you watching this on YouTube, it'll be in those show notes as well. Ami, I thank you very much for being on, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. Take care now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. That was great.
Appreciate you, buddy. All good stuff.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it. So just this, when we're done over lunch, I'm going to edit this and upload it. Once I get it uploaded, I'll know the exact date that it's going to go live. I'll shoot you a note so you know when that is. Whatever day it winds up. What's that?
My team will spread it socially when it's up too. So
appreciate it. Do you want me to send you the raw? Do they like to cut stuff up? Do you want me to send the raw video file as well, or do you care about that?
I don't think. You're welcome to, but I don't.
Okay, no worries.
I'll ask them if they want it. I don't.
Yeah, if not, no big deal. I just make it available. As far as I'm concerned, this is a digital asset for both of us. So if they want to chop it up and use a piece, I'm fine with that.
Send it. If they want it, they'll use it. So, okay.
Awesome. Whatever the date winds up being, it will drop on YouTube and LinkedIn on Tuesday morning at 8 of that week. And then it goes audio the next day. I'll tag you and your company in the LinkedIn post. And to your point about sharing it, that's the one thing I ask. Just help me share it around.
Happy to do it. So.
Awesome. You have a great day,
Appreciate
my friend.
you, buddy. Thank you. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. Take care. Bye-bye.